Some people, when they get hurt, don't argue. They don't cry. They don't throw things or send angry texts at 2 in the morning. They just go quiet. And if that's you, if you've ever shut down completely when someone said the wrong thing, pulled away without a single word, and felt like no one around you could understand why, this video was made for you. Because what you do isn't weakness. It isn't coldness. And it definitely isn't something that's broken inside of you. There's actually a very specific psychological reason why certain people respond to pain with silence. And once you understand it, you will never look at yourself the same way again. Let's start with something that might feel uncomfortably familiar. You're in a conversation, maybe with someone you love, maybe with a friend or a coworker, and something they say hits you in exactly the wrong place. It stings. Maybe it embarrasses you. Maybe it feels like a betrayal. And instead of reacting, instead of defending yourself or speaking up, something shifts inside you. A door closes. You pull back. You get quiet. And from the outside, people might think you're fine, or that you're being passive-aggressive, or that you just don't care. But on the inside, you're carrying something incredibly heavy, and you have absolutely no idea how to put it into words. That experience has a name in psychology. It's called emotional shutdown, and it's far more common than most people realize. Research in affective neuroscience, the study of how our brains process emotion, shows that when certain people experience a high enough level of emotional pain, their nervous system doesn't escalate. It does the opposite. It goes into what scientists call a freeze response. You've probably heard of fight or flight, but freeze? That's the third option, and it's the one nobody talks about. Your body and your brain, in that moment, are not being passive. They are actively protecting you from an overwhelming experience that feels too dangerous to engage with directly. And this connects directly to something called the polyvagal theory, developed by neuroscientist Dr. Stephen Porges. He discovered that our nervous system has multiple response pathways when we feel threatened. Some people go into fight mode. They argue. They escalate. Some go into flight mode. They leave the room. They run. But some people, especially those who have experienced repeated emotional pain in their early lives, go into a shutdown state, a deep, quiet, dorsal vagal response where the system essentially powers down. This isn't a choice. It happens automatically, beneath conscious awareness, in milliseconds. Your nervous system learned, at some point, that going silent was the safest thing it could do. And here's where it gets really personal. Because this pattern almost never starts in adulthood. Attachment researchers like John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth spent decades studying how children learn to respond to emotional pain, based on what happens around them. If you grew up in an environment where expressing hurt led to being dismissed or punished or made to feel like you were just too much, your developing brain made a very logical conclusion. Silence is safe. Speaking up is dangerous. That lesson got wired in so deeply that now, as an adult, your automatic response to emotional pain is still that same protective silence. You're not being difficult. You're running software that was written when you were small and vulnerable and had very few other options. There's also something called cognitive dissonance that plays a huge role here. When someone you love hurts you, you're suddenly holding two painful truths at once. This person matters to me, and this person just caused me pain. That internal conflict is genuinely hard to process in real time. And for people who tend towards silence, the mind responds by shutting the whole system down temporarily, like a computer that overheats and goes into safe mode. The silence isn't a statement. It's not manipulation. It's your brain saying, I cannot process this right now. Give me space. But here's what makes this even more complicated. Most people around you don't understand any of this. They see your silence, and they interpret it through their own lens. They think you're giving them the cold shoulder. They think you're punishing them. And so they either push harder, which makes you retreat deeper, or they walk away frustrated. And now the situation has gotten worse without a single word being spoken. This is one of the most painful cycles that silent people experience. Your silence, which was meant to protect you, often ends up being misread in ways that create even more hurt. And this is where psychologist Brené Brown's research on vulnerability becomes incredibly important. Brown found that the people who struggle most to speak up when they're hurting are often the same people who feel shame most intensely. not guilt. Shame. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am something bad. When you're hurting and you go silent, part of what's happening is that deep-seated shame, telling you that if you actually said how you feel out loud, you'd be exposed. You'd be too much. You'd be weak. And so you protect yourself the only way that ever felt safe. You disappear into the quiet. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom. For people who go silent when hurt, that space often feels impossibly small. The shutdown happens so fast, so automatically, that there's almost no gap between the pain and the silence. But here's what's important to understand. That space can grow. Not through forcing yourself to speak before you're ready. That rarely works and often backfires. But through learning to recognize what's happening inside your body in real time and slowly, gently, giving yourself permission to exist in the pain without immediately needing to escape it. Because the silence itself was never the problem. It was a solution, an imperfect, lonely, misunderstood solution, but a solution that kept you safe when nothing else could. The real work isn't about becoming someone who never goes quiet. It's about understanding why you do, releasing the shame around it, and, when the time feels right, finding words for the things you've been carrying alone for far too long. You are not broken. You are not cold. You are not punishing anyone. You are someone whose nervous system learned to protect a heart that felt too much. And that, honestly, says more about your depth than your damage. And if you've watched this far, and something in you finally feels seen, stay curious about that feeling. Because the pattern that goes silent, it almost always has a deeper story beneath it. And that story? That's what the next video is about.